But if we move this into a maybe more practical, like let's price this risk out example, and this might be a new game we introduce of where I sort of give you risk, you have to price them out. Since you started your career at Lloyd's, you weren't a marine underwriter, but I'm going to give you your chance today.
Oh, lucky me.
So your fiance is a rower. Recently rower, avid recent rower. She has decided to take her boat to the 2 towns over along your local river. She insists on calling it a voyage and wants to get insurance on her boat for this voyage.
Okie dokie. What's she insuring against? What's the peril?
The peril is if her vessel sinks.
Does she want? She wants to
insure safe
for the boat, or is it her own
safe recoverables if the boat sinks? So possibly there's a possible human injury component to it.
So a mixture of coverages. Ooh,
Yeah.
complex.
Exactly.
Might need to consult with different lines of business here to get through this.
So let's use just the hull part of this.
Okay.
For this,
we'll start with the whole. So
yeah.
So the first thing that you need to know is how much does the boat cost
Yep.
to replace? So if you're worried, if my fiance is worried that she's going to basically have to pay somebody for the boat if the boat gets lost in this flood, then the maximum.
Can we call it at sea?
Just at sea on the River Severn. How much is she going to have to pay to the person that lent her the boat, or just if it's her boat even, to replace this boat? Because that's the maximum you could charge, right? Because if you charged the cost of the boat, there'd be no point buying insurance because you just buy a new boat if it happened instead. And the simplest way to price this would be then to come up with some sort of measure, which is how many times, and you use this to do probability in insurance, how many times a year, or in how many years is it likely that you lose that boat?
Mm-hmm.
And then times that proportion by the total value of the boat, in the hope that that hedge eventually repays for the boat. So to give you an example, if you think that based on the number of voyages that are being made in this boat every year, there's in a 5-year period it would sink once, then you'd charge 1 in 5 or 20% of the total cost of the boat.
Yep.
And then over 5 years you'd get 20% plus 20% plus 20% plus 20% plus 20%.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you would have covered your cost of the loss. Even if that loss happened right away, you know that over a 5-year term you're going to make your money back. So then the hard part is to work out what is that number, what is the probability of these boats going down. So if you have data, that's the critical bit, that underwriters are always looking for. And the reason underwriters might not write this kind of business is because they're afraid that there's no data. So what if this kind of boat sinks every week, not once every 5 years, right? That's the concern. So they would try and look for comparables a lot of the time. So maybe there's no data on this boat sinking. Maybe there's some news stories somewhere, so they can at least get a flavour for how often are these boats being lost. But perhaps they do have data on how often those funny ducks that you find with the pedal boats.
Oh, yeah.
Those big swan-shaped things. Let's say, for example, they are able to track some data down on that, and they say, okay, so it's not quite as bad as those because it's a professional rower, let's say. Somebody who knows what they're doing, and they're less likely to be under the influence of alcohol whilst rowing, but that's a comparable amount of water hazard risk. So let's take that and inflate it slightly and adjust for that. And then you might say, okay, that's the data I had was at a national level. How dangerous is this river journey that they're planning to make versus other rivers? And you might look and go, oh, the River Severn, strongly associated with flooding and incredibly high currents and a lot of danger, so, versus some other rivers. So maybe we want to actually put up the price a bit here relative to others. So you're always looking basically for points of comparison, and then to continue adjusting over time. So that's why when you're buying insurance, you'll always see your price moving about. As new data is added, new data points are added that change the perspective